Nick?
So this is a question I think I've developed some answers to for myself in the past couple of years making shorts and stuff, but I'd love to get your input. What are the things, when you're making a movie with no budget, what are the things that you absolutely have to spend money on?
Food.
That wins. That's wins.
I mean, at the end of the day, again, I go back to Corman because that's where my father learned from Roger Corman. I'm learning from my father. You can pay the crew, excuse my language here, but you can pay the crew shit. You can work long hours. All these things, if they're fed well and they're constantly taken care of, nobody's going to complain. Yep. We don't normally do it, but that's why your second meals are one thing, and the next day we always try to make sure the lunch is better than it was the day before because we might have worked longer. I'm a big stickler when I'm producing for a 12-hour day. Doesn't always happen, but you want to make sure that the food, the craft service, you actually pay the crafty person more than you would normal crew member to make sure that the food is there. I mean, that's my opinion.
I found that there's certain things that I've just never been able to get around, like a good 5.1 mix or 7.1 mix. So those are the things that no matter how many people you know, you can get favors from color correction often to really get good color correction. Those are kind of the last steps that I've often just had a hard time not spending money on because I can do a lot of it myself. But yes, definitely food. Actors, good actors. I mean, yeah, a lot will work for nothing, for free, whatever. But you need good actors. They're carrying your whole movie. So, for me, that's where you got to put some money and preferably SAG actors, and if you can.
Maybe something that happened while on set or before in pre-production that film school could not have taught you for this, but since that happened, you were never the same in terms of how you prepared, whether people thought you were totally OCD, but you knew that what you were doing was right because you never wanted to have that happen again, and you were probably you were protecting your own production.
I think, of course, it depends on what your goal is for your film. If you're trying to get your money back, that's one goal. If you're trying to win, or get into a big festival, that's another goal. If you're just trying to make something, that's another goal. For me, I think by far the most eye-opening moment in this business because I had actually been in the business for many years working in commercials. I started working in commercials in college, and I still do, 10 years now. And I was always on the periphery of Hollywood, and I had, know people in Hollywood and, had a manager and, talked to all these different people, and I had made my movie and I had real cast in it and all this stuff. But the one thing I was not prepared for and that I wish I had done like day one when I got to LA was go to AFM, because that place is the most eye-opening experience for an independent filmmaker that you could have, I think, in terms of this business, because it's essentially like a giant bazaar where they take over the whole Lowe's hotel, and every hotel room is an office of a different sales agent, distributor, producer, whatever, from all over the world. And they're there, and they're slinging films. And they don't care what your movie's about. They want to know who's in it, what's the genre, what was the budget. And you when you experience that like firsthand, you can't, I can tell you this, but you can't mentally understand until you stand in that place and you walk those floors and you see how it's done. It's mind-blowing. And then you realize you're like, okay, actually the movie business is kind of like the forks and knives business. Like one fork is made out of titanium and one is made out of plastic. And that's how they sell these things. It's insane. For an artist, for a filmmaker, you can't believe that that's how it's done.
So when you left that first time from the Lowe's, did you feel almost like shell-shocked a little bit, or did it give you a new hope because you realized, okay, then I can do this and this, and then?
I felt, completely overwhelmed, and I don't really get overwhelmed very easily. say cool under fire, but that place, it just makes you feel like, wow, there's a tidal wave out there that people are surfing on that like I didn't even know about, or I wasn't, I was still like inland, or I don't know how to explain it. And I know this sounds naive. I know that it's like, oh, well, of course, AFM and film markets and Cannes and Toronto, that's how they work. But again, you just don't really get it until you're standing there and you're seeing it.
Sure, that's great. Thank you.
I think I've got two things. One is, I think, just learning distribution, because unfortunately, I think we probably have all learned the hard way. And hopefully you do actually learn how to do it better, that you can actually make good deals, and you don't have to be so afraid, and you don't have to be so eager or desperate. But whether you make money on your film or whether your investors make their money back, it lives or dies on the decisions you make going in to work with a distributor. So I think those are the biggest lessons that I continue to carry forward and try to make even to continue to learn. And then my second one is oftentimes we have to work with name talent, and I've just kind of learned over the years, boy, that experience can be good or bad. And often on our kind of budget levels, it's not the most comfortable film. It's not what they're maybe used to. It's not the big trailers. And so for me, it's important to actually get to know the people and socialize with them before I cast them. It's not enough to just meet them in a casting room. I actually like to go out in a social setting and just see, are we going to get along? Are they going to be able to roll with me on this and go on this journey with me and not complain about it? And the only way to really, that I have found to figure that out is to go out with them and socialize a little bit. And there's always someone else. So if you're getting a bad vibe from them, there's always another actor, because we're not talking about the A+ level. We're talking about some really great, amazing, known character actors and working actors. But there will be somebody else. If you don't vibe with that person, or you think they're difficult, there is another person that's just as qualified and just as good.
Something that I was probably never prepared for, and no one ever told me would happen. I can't actually talk about the movie per se, but I was held for ransom.
Oh, wow.
Thinking of that, the crew came first, and the casting crew came first to get everyone away from the area, and hoping that the company I was dealing with could get me out of there. That was, you asked for a thing that changed it. That's been my barometer of how bad a movie is. It ain't that bad, so I'm doing good. I mean, that's my day to day. If something's really bad,
what country was that?
can't get into it, bro.
Not even the country.
Nope. Can't get into it.
It's probably best. That's smart. But wow, I mean, I can't even imagine.
I did get permission to do the making of that film.
Are you making it?
We are actually in the process of writing so far.
Oh.
There's so many different people who are part of it that we're trying to get everyone's side, because
Right.
what I dealt with was different than what the other person dealt with. I was just the last person to leave.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you. Wow.
I had a moment. Basically, I think the biggest thing I took from like one of my learning experiences was, if you don't do it when you're on set and when you're shooting, you're never going to get a chance to do it. So
The old adage of fixing in post doesn't exist.
yeah, exactly. So like if you're like I had there's a one shot in my film Queen that I don't have a moment, and every time I watch it, I am upset that I let it all get away from me to not get this one thing that I really wanted, because if I don't do it then, I'm never going to get to do it afterwards. There's no, especially on these budgets, there's no real thing called reshoots. There's picking up maybe little pieces here and there, but yeah, there's no fixing it in post. So it's like trust it. Like that moment was, I didn't trust my gut. Well, I did. I knew what my gut wanted. I went with kind of the sway of everyone else wanting to do something else, and I was talked out of something, and I wish I wasn't. And I still love. I mean, it's just that one moment, and I realized I will never let that happen again. Those 12 hours of those days that we're on set and we're shooting in this tight time, that's your time as the filmmaker, and it's everyone else's, but it's yours because you live with it forever. And I said to actually the person that was involved that kind of forced it to not happen, I said, you know what? You walk out of here in the film was 12 days. So you walk away in 12 days and you never have to worry about this again. I live with this for the rest of my life. And it sounds severe, but it feels severe when you do. We all know that these films define us for the rest of our lives.
I'll just follow that thread because I really like what you're saying. I would say in the indie world especially, and really it should be any world, but they'll never do it on the bigger movies because they can just spend money later. But it on the indie world especially, it's like, and I say this even at the jobs I work, it's like really the motto needs to be fix it in pre. You have to fix it in pre-production. There's always going to be surprises in production. But you need to like map it out so there are surprises. It's not stuff you shouldn't have already like figured out ahead of time. I mean, when we learned a great discipline, which I'm glad we learned this discipline, my wife and I, because when we first started doing the movies, we were shooting in 16 millimeter. Using, you know, the CP16 Vietnam War camera. And when you're shooting an ultra low budget indie film in 16 millimeter and you're paying for that film stock and that processing and that transfer, you know what you're shooting. And you figure it out ahead of time because you don't have the film to burn through multiple takes or coverage. I mean, I had boards, and basically, like, if there was a close-up in the board, that's because I knew that line was the close-up. I couldn't run that scene for I was like, no, that's the line I'm in the close-up. Here I'm in the two-shot because it's like you can't. So that we've tried to carry that discipline over to the digital age. And I think it's really a good discipline to have. You can always be spontaneous and come up with new ideas in the set and seize the moment, but it's always good to like have that thing to fall back on, just basically having it prepped out. So I would say that will really help you on anything you do, is basically prep it out as much as possible. And even though it makes you a little bit paranoid and crazy, you basically have to play the game, if you're producing it yourself, of thinking of every possible scenario that can go wrong. And you'll still be surprised. But it kind of makes you a little bit crazy because you're like, oh, I'm going to go here and we're going to shoot. Well, it's like, well, is it trash day when you shoot? When is trash day on that street? You know, it's things like that. You have to always think of like anything that could possibly go wrong, which is a miserable thing to do, but you have to.
So then why do it? If it's so stressful?
Because you have to. Because if there was any way you could do anything else, you would stop, but you can't.